Someone has your password, your face, your answers, everything they need to be you. And right now, they're using it. They pass every check, password, Face ID, security questions, and by the time you realize your account is gone. It's an account takeover. How did they get in, and why didn't anyone notice?
It's important to analyse what's taken place, try and find the commonalities, try and find if it's Ring. Well, what is the common factors here? Are they in the same location? Are they all using the same IP? Are they all got the same device? Are they all using throwaway mobile phones, domain names and email addresses? These are the little trigger points that it is important that you do the analysis so then you can go to prevent it.
With these ones, the victims often don't know they're being scammed until they're a year down the line, 2 years down the line, because from our perspective, behaviours on the account don't change.
Yeah.
If that abusive boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it may be does what they're doing, the behaviours might be the same throughout. We still think we trust that account because ultimately it's doing what it did from the very start.
Hello and welcome to What the Fraud, a podcast by Sumsub where digital fraudsters meet their match. I'm Thomas Taraniak, currently responsible for some of our very exciting partnerships here at Sumsub, a global verification platform helping businesses to verify users, companies and transactions. Today we're looking at account takeovers and how they've fundamentally changed. This isn't just a security problem anymore, it's a trust problem. Everything looks normal, the checks pass, but the person using the account isn't your customer. So, how do you stop the fraudster before they get in? My guests today are Suz Lynch, Head of Financial Crime at Monavate, and Paul Marsden, Head of Risk at Monavate. Monavate is a fintech company that provides payments as a service infrastructure so companies can launch and manage financial products. Suz, Paul, welcome to What the Fraud.
I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So, Suz, Paul, before we get into how account takeovers can happen, can you explain to me your roles at Monavate and how you work together to manage risk and financial crime?
So, as you said, I am the head of financial crime at Monavate. So, ultimately, myself and my team are responsible for onboarding our clients, ensuring that their financial crime capabilities, the transaction monitoring, is what we would expect it to be from a regulatory standpoint. As they go live, we will offer them support and guidance, but we also set a second line. So we ensure that their transaction monitoring is fit for purpose. And we also do transaction monitoring on them, sample checking, audits, things like that, to make sure that they are not allowing their program to be facilitated for any sort of money laundering, fraud, things like that.
Thank you, Suz.
Yeah, so from my perspective, where Suz is doing the more technical on the ground fighting of the crime, it's my job to kind of foresee any issues that are coming, make sure that the controls we have in place are actually working, make sure that any risk to the business, fraud is ultimately, it's just a big risk to the business. Yes, it's financial crime, but from a business perspective and from our board's perspective, it's a massive risk and it affects all different parts of the business. So ultimately, it's my job to ensure that we're covering every kind of area.
Excellent. So we're covering multiple bases on this call today, so that's excellent. Account takeovers and attacks that are based on using someone else's credentials remain one of the biggest issues within fraud globally, whatever industry you are, from fintech, banking, etc. Let's start right at the beginning then. Suz, what does an account takeover actually look like end to end?
So there's various different ways that account takeover can happen. It can happen right at the beginning of customer joining whatever organisation it is, or it can happen a few months or even a few years down the line. So if we take the first example, you can have individuals who are using victims' details to try and bypass essentially the verification checks. And then you will see a slight change in perhaps behaviours, patterns, volumes, values of spend. You might see the IP address change, the device ID change, addresses, email addresses, any sort of verification. Essentially, what the fraudster is trying to do is to make it so that the victim doesn't realise that the account is being taken over. So they might have engaged them through phishing attacks, through spam emails and so on to try and gain access to their accounts. You also see it with accounts that have been in a really great standing for years. They might have gone dormant for a while, and then all of a sudden they've kicked back into life. And you can see very high value transactions taking place at merchants that you wouldn't normally see that individual, that customer, having completed before. And if you have the right rules in place, you'll be able to see that behaviour has changed quite significantly. And when you delve into it, you'll be able to see there's different parts of the information that has changed, and be able to obviously pinpoint that perhaps that customer's been a victim of account takeover.
Certainly. Account takeovers can be devastating for the user, but also for the business as well, with huge losses. The account is already trusted, the friction is low, and by the time anyone notices, the damage is already done. What kinds of cases really stand out to you in terms of the real impact to business, Paul?
I think that the impact on the business are the cases that aren't spotted instantly. So yeah, where behaviors change really quickly and it can be quite obvious in some cases. There are other cases with the development of fraudsters and how good they're getting at these things where things don't change so much. So you've got a bunch of controls, you've got a bunch of limits, you've got all these different defenses set up for somebody that you trust, somebody who's got through all of your KYC procedures, somebody that's got through everything that you've put in place. And you're in a place where you've trusted your own controls, never mind your customer. And ultimately, you're now dealing with someone that you can't trust. And your controls are set up completely different. So I think that where we're affected most is where we can't spot things really quickly. The fraud's already happened, the money's already moved, and the damage has effectively been done. And I think that's a challenge that every business has got nowadays.
But I think this is really important to take the learnings.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, in our life, while working in financial crime, a lot of it is reactive. You try and be as proactive as you possibly can. You try and think of every edge case, every possible instance of fraud that might arise, but it's impossible because, technology is ever changing. But what's really important is if the fraud does happen, you don't notice it for a while, and then obviously it gets a bit bigger, it hits a couple of more customers. It's important not to sort of dwell on what happened. It's important to, and analyze what's taken place, try and find the commonalities, try and find if it's a ring, well, what is the common factors here? Are they in the same location? Are they all using the same IP? Are they all got the same device? Are they all using throwaway mobile phones? What about domain names and email addresses? These are the little trigger points that it is important that you do the analysis so then you can go to prevent it in the future because you're looking out for it. So what I wouldn't want to happen is that, any companies out there who have been, the victims of account takeover or their customers have been the victims of account takeover, don't dwell on what's happened, fight to make sure it doesn't happen again in the future.
Certainly difficult as well, of course, to be proactive when there's so many blind spots with the new technologies which are being used, right,
Exactly.
on the market by fraudsters who are trying to game the system and also take over these accounts. I mean, a question back to you as well, Suz. On the other side of what Paul was saying, what is the damage when done to actual individuals? I mean, what cases stand out to you?
Well, I've been in financial crime now for 15 years, so there's lots of different cases. I started my career in First Line as the first contact centre, and you're listening to clients who thought that email that they received was completely genuine, and they can't believe that this has happened to them, and they
Right.
can't believe that they gave over their details, and so on and so forth. And it's very difficult for us to sit in a situation where we have to tell them, unfortunately, your money is gone. We can't tell you exactly where it's gone. And in some cases, those individuals don't get their money back. I mean, it's better now because we have a lot more liability that sits with the issuers and with the banks in order to take responsibility for this that happened. But, when I was starting, that was it. It was your account, it was your details, your money got taken. It was very difficult for us to prove that you didn't do that. But thankfully, we have sort of moved on from that. But it's very difficult to hear, these people are in very vulnerable situations. Some of them potentially could have had all their life savings taken away, stolen from them. And we have to listen to those stories of how their details have been compromised.
Yeah.
But it is about keeping it, the point is trying to find out what you can do to sort of help that customer.
I mean, we're focused on the fraud because of what we do, and we're looking at the accounts, but the background to some of these cases can be horrendous for the reasons
Yeah.
why these accounts have been compromised. So these people are in very vulnerable places, and I think there's a huge onus on us to make sure that we get it as close to right as possible. I mean, from a risk perspective, um, kind of bringing it back to the business side of things, it's impossible to stop fraud completely. You're never going to stop it. And the way that it's been industrialized, I mean, the fraud teams could be as big as our Monavate team, essentially. They'll be sitting there. They could be as organized, as rich, as doing a better job than what we're doing, maybe even faster. And like Sue says, it's all about us learning and us getting there and just trying to keep up with it as best we can and limiting it as the best way we possibly can.
Certainly the case. And looking at the victims themselves, I mean, if we were to take a fraudster and what they're currently doing, they're using the credentials of a real person, right? And to stop and be proactive, you need to understand how to act like them. I mean, what are the warning signs, the signals specifically that you'd look out for to stop a fraudster in their tracks from account takeovers?
It's a difficult one because there's lots of different avenues that you can go down. You've got the glaringly obvious ones, which are account is open and then details change quite quickly. And it's something that I've seen in the past. So, within 24 hours of the account opening, the geolocation has changed, or the device has changed, or the IP. And this is why it's so important at the point of onboarding. Yes, KYC is great and you need it, but you also need to look at the background data. You have to pay attention to the device. You have to pay attention to the IP. Are they utilizing a VPN? These details that elude a lot of people during onboarding is so important because that's how you can see where the account was taken over or when it was compromised. Obviously, we've got AI and we've got deep fakes and things like that. And it's up to our KYC systems to be able to find those and highlight them for further alerts so that we can go in and investigate further. So there needs to be that real partnership that your technology is growing as well.
Exactly. And when we're looking at, I guess you mentioned the geographical IP device and stuff, and when you're specifically issuing cards and you have users who are real, who are spending on those cards, do you look at the discrepancy between volume, frequency, deposits, as well as, of course, expenditure?
Yeah, 100%. It's very important that when you are, writing your rules for your monitoring, you're looking at volume, value, and geographical location. So it's not just one to be looking for customers who are doing high spend. Yeah, that's a great rule to have, and you want to see people who are hitting the big numbers. But you also want to see people who are trying to fly under the radar.
Mm.
Okay, so that's why count is really important. So if you're looking at card payments, you want to know how many times they're using that for smaller amounts. It could be for testing. It could be to see, through a bin attack, they might have obtained the card details online and they're trying to see whether or not these cards are active in order for them to obviously fund their fraud later on. So it's not just about the big value ticket items of fraud. It's also about the small values but high velocity. Is really important. So I always say to our clients, when you're writing your rules, don't just think about the value, you must think about the count as well.
Certainly. It's really interesting to think about that and where you're sort of exposed to fraud as well. Across the board, there might be lots of different typographies and lots of different angles that they're pursuing. So, Paul, from your perspective, where do most companies underestimate their exposure to fraud within, let's say, the fintech industry?
I think partly what Suze has just said about believing that their tools are doing the work for them. I think that there's a big kind of onus on, and you know yourself, Tom, there's lots of guys selling you everything when you go to every event in the industry telling you that this fraud tool does that fraud tool does the other. And most of the conversations that you will have, they go along those lines in the early stages. But every single one of those tools still needs people with experience, people with know-how, people that have seen how the fraudsters are working in the past, actually using these things. I think there is a big failing on how much fraud is looked at as a risk to the business, and it's rather just a tick a box for the regulator as opposed to look after our business as a whole. So one of the big things for me is forcing this stuff onto our exec and onto our board and make sure that they understand how crucial all of this stuff is, because the questions they should be asking is not how did the fraud happen? What was the situation with case A? It should be, is this going to happen again tomorrow? Is this going to happen again in the next 6 months? is this issue going to get bigger? And I think once they start asking those questions, we get to a point of thinking about our existing controls. Are they working? Are they working fast enough? Can we get more controls? What can we do better? I think that's it. I think it's not just down to Suz. It's not just down to a head of risk or a head of compliance or wherever people may sit within a business. It has to start right at the top. They all have to worry about it. And ultimately, from a personal point of view, it's when we talked about the victims, I feel like everybody should be involved in trying to slow this down to as slow as we can possibly get it.
What's really interesting is as we are bin sponsors, and we have a lot of clients that we work with, a lot of them have got these really, really great ideas and they want to capitalize on that and they're building their business. And for some of them, the thought of AML, financial crime risk, is an afterthought because they've got this amazing product and they've built this great system and it's fantastic and it's all great. When we speak to them about, right, okay, you're creating your rules, you need to have certain thresholds, certain monitoring thresholds. They're like, oh, well, what do you think it is? I can't tell you what your risk is. You have to determine what your risk appetite is. Then they're kind of struggling, well, what's right, what's wrong? And my question to them is, right, how much money are you willing to lose? If you think about, you allow your customers to be able to spend £10,000 in a single transaction. And let's say, God forbid, you have 100 customers who are all victims of fraud at once and 10 grand is taken out of each one of their accounts. Do you have enough money in your wallet in order to pay these customers back who've been victims of fraud? That's your risk. How much money are you willing to lose before you do something about it? And I know that it should be in the forefront of everybody's mind, but when you break it down and you think about it, the bottom line, that kind of gets the conversation going a bit more.
I think there's a lot to be said about kind of the ongoing monitoring of everything as well. I know everything Suz is talking about is about trends and what's happening and what's changing, but I think within many businesses, there's not enough focus on re-verification, kind of the stuff that you guys would do, how we re-verify our customers, how we change the risk rating of a customer. I mean, a customer that we trust, we've onboarded to, I mentioned earlier, our trusted rules and limits and KYC kind of parameters. Once they get through there, their risk rating could change within a week. If their account's compromised, their risk rating could change 5 times, 6 times, the more greedy these fraudsters get. So one place that I don't see pretty much anywhere, I mean, we try to do it as best we can, but it's very difficult to kind of risk rate somebody on the hop. And I think that's where, when we come in the next few years and AI and machine learning, that type of thing, that's where our win can be. The win doesn't just have to be on the fraudster side of things.
Well, they're utilizing those tools as well. So it's that cat and mouse game where we need to be faster. So diving in a little bit deeper into how you both work together, especially on the escalation paths, right? From a risk perspective, when does an account takeover become a business level, let's say, issue that you need to step in on, Paul?
Ultimately, from my part, it's when controls are ultimately failing. I mean, best way to look at it is, I keep going back to it, it's the speed of detection and how quickly we stop things and how quickly we can recover things. Because ultimately, if our controls are spotting things within minutes to a day of something happening, then for what this is, we're probably doing all right, because you can't see a change until the change has happened, right? But ultimately, it's when things have went to an extended point, that to me is a control failure. Whether the changes in behavior within the account have been really small and it's took us a little bit longer, our rules are maybe not as tight enough to catch these really fine changes. I mean, some fraudsters might be really clever. They may know everything about the account they're taking over and mimic it, essentially. If that's the case, what can you do from a controls perspective? But if there are some obvious ones and it takes a long time for us to spot it, everything on my side is looking at the controls. Do they work? Are they fast enough? Do we need more? But then there's also the friction points that you have to worry about from a business perspective, where we still want a nice customer experience. We still want our trusted customers not to have to go through hell to use the account the way they want to. So there's a balancing act, a big balancing act in how we do it. And that starts right from the onboarding of a customer, as you guys know, through the KYC side of things, all the way through to how we monitor them, how many checks we do over the year, how often do we involve them in re-verification, all that type of stuff.
Well, from the perspective of, let's say, the business, of course, that's super important to protect. But at the end of the day, the onus is on us to make sure that the user is safe as well. And education is a massive part of that. And that's why we created the What the Fraud podcast. And in the mission of fighting fraud and customers being, let's say, alert to it, what should these customers be doing in order to keep their accounts, their details, their PII safe?
It is a difficult one with the emerging technologies and the deep fakes and the more sophisticated frauds that are coming out. It is really difficult for everybody to keep themselves safe. There are different things that you can do. You can get specific labels on your credit file. So you can have categories added to your credit file, which would basically say, I've been a victim of fraud in the past. If you have an account in my name, please call me and ask for a password. That's always on your credit file. And obviously, if your number changes, that's up to you to fill that out or to update that. And companies are supposed to obviously engage with that and check directly with the client. Doing research where you're shopping. I think this is something that's said so much, and we're not just saying it because, it might sound fun. We're saying it because it happens. If you're not checking the websites that you're using, that you're actually giving them your details, this might happen. If you're going on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and an advert pops up, it happens to me all the time, and I see something that pops up on Facebook, and I'm like, oh my God, that would be amazing. Oh, I want that. But the first thing I do is I close Facebook and I go onto Google and I check reviews. I check to see if there's any scams related to it,
Right.
or any sort of adverse media that comes up. Now, that's just me because that's the industry and the life that, I've been raised in. And then I will make the decision, obviously, if I want to focus on there.
There's a real human aspect to it as well, though, Suze, where I don't want to say it's simple because it's not, but there is the part where you literally just question everything. Don't give your details out to anybody without questioning absolutely everything because the world isn't safe. Don't be naive. Keep away from the naivety as such. It's there's a human part to it as well.
And what's really important, and this is said a lot, and I know that a lot of banks and financial institutions out there will always say, "We'll never come round to your house. We'll never call you. We'll never do this, that, and that." But you do get people who are vulnerable and might receive a quite a threatening phone call, and things like that. What I have to stress is always remember your bank is not going to threaten you. They can't threaten you. They can't come round to your house. They could send you a letter, but they can't phone you and demand anything. Now, if you're worried or anything like that, what I would say is always hang up the phone and find out what the number is for your bank or whoever it is and call them direct. And they'll tell you straight away whether or not it's genuine or not. So that gut feeling you're having in your stomach going, oh, I'm just not sure about this. I've always said, and I've always said to my team, there's no such thing as stupid questions. If the thought pops into your head, something made you think that, something made you feel that, even if it was just a small thought, hang up the phone and do something about it. Go directly to the organization. Don't listen to what anybody has to say over the phone, specifically if they're asking for your details, your passwords, your PINs, anything like that.
Certainly the case, and I think some fintechs are sort of adapting to that. Only contact us, or we'll only contact you rather through the app, right? Revolut, etc. But when we're talking about, let's say, these victims, of course, there's a lot of non-sophisticated routes to defrauding people, but they are becoming more sophisticated. We talk about it with the sophistication shift here at Sumsub. Account takeovers aren't just technical. They also do start with relationships. So you have that combination between, of course, the relationship and the technical side with sophisticated fraud, such as romance scams, right? Authorized push payment fraud. These are the entry points to a lot of fraud as well. Fraudsters build the trust, then they exploit it. And that can be also a very terrible thing for the victims themselves. How often does that translate, though, into a full account takeover?
Well, it depends what the fraudster is asking for. It could be a case that they're just asking for money. Send me money. Sometimes they'll pay it back. Sometimes they won't. They want to keep their stream of funds going on as long as possible. So progressing into that stage of an account takeover, they're kind of limiting themselves because they have to get obviously those details from the person that they are potentially scamming. And then when they go on that, they have to change the contact information on the account. So obviously they're not alerted to the fact that their account has been taken over. So it kind of limits when you start going into account takeover territory. I think a lot of romance scams like to keep that relationship. Just give me the money. I need it for something. So
Yeah.
the victim still controls the funds, but they're willingly sort of sending it out.
The difficulty with this one, going back to trends and how we can kind of assess things from a monitoring perspective and ongoing. With these ones, the victims often don't know they're being scammed until they're a year down the line, 2 years down the line,
Yeah.
because behaviors, and from our perspective, behaviors on the account don't change. If that abusive boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it may be does what they're doing, the behaviors might be the same throughout. We still think we trust that account because ultimately it's doing what it did from the very start.
Certainly. And I guess when we're looking at the victims themselves, if you have that relationship and that sophistication, there is still a lot of victim blaming that you see on social media, within society, right? Should people's perceptions of victims and victims of fraud actually change quite a bit? I believe they should. It's not their fault. It can, I guess, happen to anyone. Every time we do have these podcasts, we do ask our guests if you've been a victim of fraud yourself, and I would say 90% of them have, right? So do you believe that mentality should shift in modern society?
100%.
100%.
And I will put my hands up and say I wasn't a victim shamer, but I was one of those people that would say, "How did you not know?" And it wasn't until I was on a panel a few months ago, and they were talking specifically about romance scams, and a person that was on the panel with me had actually created a book, and she was talking from the victim's perspective because she was a victim of a romance scam. So she interviewed a lot of people and talked about that journey. And it wasn't until I saw her perspective as a victim and as a writer when I thought, right, okay, these could actually be quite sophisticated, and I could understand how people manipulate the vulnerabilities of an individual to make them feel like, they're loved, they're wanted. And there were a lot of situations where they would give them presents, they would give them money, they would ask for money, they would pay it back. And, everything seemed really normal until it escalated and escalated.
Mm.
So, yes, I live in the world of financial crime. I know what I'm looking for. I would know what odd questions look for, but not everybody has my way of thinking. And it's very easy for me to sit here and say, "Oh, how did you not know?" That was such an obvious question because I'm not in that situation. I'm not in that environment at that particular time. And to answer your other question, yes, I have been a victim of fraud before.
I think that my example would be of a situation that wasn't actually fraud, but it was a risk that I took because it was almost too good to be true, but I really wanted the dog that I bought. So I bought a dog for a lot cheaper than I thought the dog was worth. And ultimately, I drove halfway across the country to pick this dog up thinking, this dog's not going to exist. I've sent my money's gone. And I got there, and thankfully there was a beautiful little puppy there for me, but 99% sure while I was driving there that there wasn't going to be a dog there, but I took that risk. And I sit in this industry, I listen to Suz rabbit on at me every day about the problems that we have. And ultimately, if I can kind of think, yeah, I really want that dog, then anybody can.
Certainly. The center of so many people's lives is finances, right? And people on a daily basis are taking risks with their own finances, whether or not that's through a fintech app, an exchange. And when they're trying to onboard to these apps, of course, we have that front layer of approval, that KYC. Everything looks hunky-dory. But thereafter, these account takeovers can ruin people's lives, right? So from the perspective of, let's say, the tension here, how do you reduce fraud without putting too much friction in the loop for these people who are on a day-to-day basis wanting to, let's say, make their lives better?
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? You want to take away friction by reducing the checks that you do, but if that person does become a victim of fraud, we didn't do enough. If we add too much friction because we want to put in a lot of checks to protect you,
Yeah.
we're causing too many problems because we're adding too much friction. So it's a no-win situation. I think, the industry is inundated with fintechs and, the hottest new wallets, cryptos, savings cards, lots of different things that you can have. And all of them boast, sign up to first spend within 5 minutes. I think it is about utilizing good technology, and it's about investing in your people, because technology can only get you so far. So when you invest in your people, listening to the people that are actually sitting there doing the job, thinking about their ideas, they've, got out and they've got these accounts, they've been through the process, they understand what was quick and what wasn't. It's really important to make sure that you are sort of treading that fine line between just enough friction to make sure that you're safe, but not so much that you're asking too much of your customer.
Certainly the case, and with for-profit businesses, right? Banks,
Mhm.
fintechs who do want to service what is going to be it's a massive proportion of the population which is underbanked in the world, right? And that's moving to, of course, all of these financial tools and technologies and services which will make their lives better. And of course, if there is friction in the loop, some businesses will lose out. And the businesses which don't have much friction, of course, to onboard these users and check them may seem easier for the user, but at the end of the day may put them at further risk, right? And there's this dual responsibility of the fraud itself. When it happens, the user must be educated, of course, and the business must have those controls in place. Suz, Paul, I want to find out more about what a frontline defense looks like and how fraud as a landscape has changed over the last few years. But before that, there's one important shift here. With account takeovers, the fraudster often doesn't look suspicious straight away. The account is real, the checks may pass, and everything can appear normal, right up until it isn't. That's why more teams are moving beyond one-off checks and paying closer attention to the patterns that suggest someone else is in control. At Sumsub, we've built an account takeover prevention solution that focuses on spotting those patterns early, looking at behavior, devices, and other signals to flag when something is off, while keeping things smooth for genuine users. If that's relevant to you, you can find out more details via the link in the description. Things are evolving massively. We mentioned, and Paul, you brought this up as well, AI, right? Deep fakes, different relationships, romance scams, which can be orchestrated through more sophisticated memes as well. The growth of info stealers, session hijacking, AI-assisted fraud, as I mentioned, they can adopt near instant tools anywhere in the world for a very low cost. It's becoming more democratized, which is a funny thing to say about fraudsters and fraud itself. So what feels different about fraud today compared to only a few years ago, and how do you see fraud and account takeovers looking like in 2026?
I don't know if it's going to be in 2026, but definitely in the future. I think fraudsters will start using AI bots to have conversations with people. Phishing scams, romance scams. You think you're talking to a genuine person, but you're actually talking to a bot.
16 Mac Minis in someone's bedroom. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But, we're going into a place where, AI controls our whole life. You can get it to buy your shopping. You're going to be able to get it to organize your meetings, to reply to your emails, to buy your flights, so it's really not out of the realms of possibility that fraudsters, there might only, let's say there's 10 of them in a group, they want to capitalize on as much money as possible, so they set up 50 bots each. And AI is learning from the conversations that are happening with the victims, and they know what to ask for, they know how to react, they understand the language that is used, and they can use that to manipulate individuals. And in that way, they're getting a bigger return. And the difficulty for us in the industry is when we're trying to put in new technology to combat AI and all these new technologies, we have resource limitations. We have finance limitations. We have to make sure that it's signed off by a regulator, and various different things. If you get all of that done, it then goes into a backlog of projects to see where it sits on the priority level. Fraudsters don't have that. They've got the money, they've got the time, they can just off they pop and do it. So we're always a bit on the back foot, unfortunately. And I think that's something that we really have to be aware of in the future.
I think the key as a business is closing that gap. There has to be, especially looking at it from a risk perspective, you have to understand that you're never going to stop fraud. You're never going to stop it altogether. It's a case of we have to close that gap to how far ahead the fraudsters are. If fraud happens, which it does to every single card company on the planet, we're behind them in some way, shape or form. We might be 2 steps behind them. We might be 20. Depends how big the fraud cases are. But we just have to constantly work on closing that gap. That's the key to it. There has to be an understanding you can't stop it. but we have to close the gap.
I had a manager years and years ago, and something he said to me has always stuck with me. As Paul says, we're never going to stop the fraud, but if we can cost them money, it's great. So every time we shut down an email, every time we shut down a mobile phone, every time we block a device or an IP or whatever, close an account, we're costing them more money to get more devices, to have to go and spend more money to buy them online. Yeah, it's not solving the problem, but we are hitting them financially as well. So that's important about closing that gap, closing those loopholes and costing them more time and money.
Fraud detection is becoming much more automated nowadays, but investigations still rely on that human judgment, right? How do you balance the two?
I love technology. Love being able to automate it and to, give us those answers, machine learning and AI and so on and so forth. But you will never convince me that technology will be better than an actual team on the ground. I am a firm believer in investing in your people, because if you invest in your people, they will want to do a good job for you, and in turn, they will help save your business. And I'm not just talking about my team directly, so a fraud or a financial crime team. I'm talking about your first line. I'm talking about your customer services or your operations teams. They're the first port of call. They're the first ones where victims might call in and they'll speak to. And what I find a lot of the time is we've drilled into them so much, you can't say this and you can't say that, and tipping off and this, that, and the next. They're so confused about what they can say and what they can't say that they will miss really obvious characteristics of account takeover or ID theft and things like that. So it's about enabling your teams, giving them the right training, giving them the confidence to ask the right questions, and to make their judgments. Sometimes it's not going to be right, and sometimes it'll be absolutely spot on, and it will cascade into something even bigger that you didn't even realize that it was happening at the time. So yes, you're investing in technology and all your automation and all that sort of stuff, but you still have to make sure that you've got a team that you trust. And, I've always said it, I never want to be an MLRO because I don't trust people. It's probably the wrong thing to say, but I don't trust people because I can't 100% say that they have been given the tools or allowed to be given the tools to understand, how important it is to report.
It goes back to the full business attitude that we discussed. It needs to start at the top, whereby I don't know how many times over the years I've heard a board member or somebody on an exec team say, "How many alerts did we have this week?" They didn't care what any of those alerts were or what happened with them or where they went. They just said how many we got because that's what I want put on a spreadsheet. Now, that means nothing to anybody. They actually need to care about the fraud that's happening. They need to care about the situations that people are finding themselves in. And these aren't just statistics that pop up on Suz's screen. These are people's lives and these are people's accounts and it's their money. And there are scams happening, and you can't stop that by just saying, "Oh, we've had 100 alerts in the last 2 days." That's not what financial crime is. It's not just numbers.
So, have we gotten the balance right? Or are we still over investing in tools rather than the humans and the people themselves?
I don't believe we're overinvesting. I think that the tools just have to be right. There are there's a lot of tools out there, and I think that I can only speak from the risk side of things again, but we have tools now. Rather than doing our risk assessments using spreadsheets like we did in the old days, we have lots of tools that do a lot of the nitty-gritty boring stuff for us. But when we go about choosing those tools, we do speak to 10, 15, 20 different providers. And I'll be honest with you, every time you go through this process, you probably have 17 or 18 out of 20 that you discount within 5 minutes of a conversation starting. I think there are too many tools. I don't think we're overusing the good ones, though, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
And what's really important to me is when I'm speaking to providers that want to, give us their TM rule or financial crime alert monitoring rule, whatever it might be, and I've got two project managers sitting in front of me telling me how this tool is going to benefit me. My immediately thought is, do you have anybody on your team who's ever worked in a fraud team before? Who's ever worked in financial crime compliance, at least risk even? And normally it's no, it's just, oh, we've spoken to people in the industry and we've built this because we think it's, but great, but you've never actually been on the ground and you don't understand why we do the things that we do. So I'm more inclined to speak to people who've actually have been in the industry and actually know the pitfalls and know where the problems are.
You've taught me so much on this episode. And to finish things off, although I have learnt a lot about the both of you, we like to learn a little bit more about the guests that come on to our podcast. So we have 5 quick-fire questions. No overthinking. Suz, Paul, let's go. If you could ban one risky online behaviour forever, what would it be?
Not utilising lockdown features on social media.
Excellent. Okay, that's a new one. Have you ever been a victim of fraud yourself? I know, Suz, you mentioned earlier. Paul, almost?
Almost, yeah. I don't think I have.
Excellent. Well, you're very good at your jobs. That's good to hear. What's the one thing about fraud prevention that the public completely underestimate?
They don't know best. And we're not blaming the victim in any way, shape, or form, but I think you have to have an understanding that fraudsters are very, very clever.
Do you concur, Suz?
I would say the access to data that we have through open source intelligence. We can get a lot of information from an open Facebook or an Instagram or a LinkedIn to be able to determine whether or not you are where you say you are, or where the payments are, whatever it is. We can gather a lot of information about you using OSINT.
Okay. And the penultimate question. Passwords, are they dead or are they resting? Do we need them anymore, or do we just need to forget them as a form of security?
I think they're dead. Unless you're really good and you use things like chair, house, table, which I would forget. So I would just rather use my thumb.
Yeah, they're very close to dead. As Sue says, I think that they get hacked quite easily, and we all want easy passwords, don't we?
Yeah, well, mine's 12 digits, 1 uppercase, lowercase, and a symbol as well. So I heard that was enough.
So they say. Who knows if that's enough?
Exactly. If you could have any other career other than the one that you're very happy with right now, what would it be?
Okay, I would love to be a doctor.
I always wanted to be a footballer, and I'm still depressed about it now.
Well, Suz, that was very selfless because you're still helping people now, which is great.
I think, no, do you know what? I think it's the fact I got way too into Grey's Anatomy, and I genuinely believe I could do open heart surgery with my eyes closed, like no problem whatsoever. So blame Grey's Anatomy.
Well, there were 17 seasons or so of that show, weren't there?
Yeah,
Crazy.
I was a hardcore fan for like 15 years. Yeah, love it. So yeah, I could totally be a doctor.
Well, I would say it's not too late for either of you. So follow your dreams. Well, Paul, Suz, thank you so much for joining us on the What the Fraud podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks
Thanks
you.
for having
It's
us.
been really good. Thank
Cheers.
you.
If you've enjoyed today's chat with Suz and Paul, make sure to hit follow wherever you get your podcasts. And if you can leave us a review, we'd love to hear your thoughts. It also helps more people find the show and learn how to avoid the latest scams. In the next episode, we'll be looking at cashing out. What happens when fraud actually wins? How fraudsters move from clean accounts to cash out strategies, and how we can beat fraud at the cashing out stage. I'll be joined by Apurva Shrivastava, who is product lead for global payment product at Amazon. If you want to hear more about what we do here at Sumsub and how your business can actually benefit from our verification services, definitely check out our website at sumsub.com and subscribe to our socials. Stay safe, and we'll see you on the next episode.